Hello and welcome to the back row on Air Sport ahead of another huge Six Nations weekend. With me in studio tonight, it's Gavin Cumiskey from the Irish Times and Ruaidhri O'Connor from the Irish Independent. Well, before we get stuck in, let's look at the Six Nations table as it stands going into round 3. We've got England leading the way with that pair of bonus point wins. They're 2 points clear of Wales. And of course, those two meet on Saturday afternoon in Cardiff. Scotland are in third place on 5 points, one ahead of Ireland. Then it's the French with one losing bonus point so far, and the Italians, their bottom, yet to get off the mark. Great weekend ahead, guys. Obviously, the game of the round is in Cardiff. But first of all, with Ireland, what do we want to see from this weekend, Rory?
Yeah, we're kind of off Broadway, aren't we? Sunday in Rome. Yeah. It's not quite the centre of attention. You can feel the hype coming across the Irish Sea from Wales. But I suppose this is a week where Ireland will hope to get some business done for the long term, more in terms of building momentum, I think, towards the end of the Six Nations, so that they finish it strong and go, exit the tournament on a high. So I don't think they're going to win the tournament. I think that's the 6 points between themselves and England right now. Looks beyond them, whatever they say internally in the camp. But I do think there's scope for massive improvement in the performances. I think they have a whole load of areas that they want to improve on. And they've had a pretty good record against Italy under Joe Schmidt. I think the average margin of victory is 35 points. It's getting bigger every time they play. And they'll hope to put in a really, really strong performance building into that 6 days. That will kind of, maybe the England game will ultimately define the tournament. But this will be, what they'll go back to then. That's their touchpad going into the World Cup. So I think it's a step towards a big finish. And I think that's the way Joe Schmidt is looking at it.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get into a couple of those areas where they can improve. But I guess that sense of trying to gather momentum, Gavin, would suggest that there'll potentially be a mix of a strong selection with some experimentation as well, rather than just a wholesale 15 changes.
I don't even know if you can get momentum from this game, because you're saying it's no man's land, isn't it? So they win by 60 points and no one's going to bat an eyelid. But as far as getting momentum and getting back on track after two performances, which is considered a dip by this team, is Murray and Sexton getting their combinations right again. We really do need to see the midfield start to gel, because there's constantly an injury, and again there's no Ringrose again this week, and he mightn't even play against France. But again, it's quite funny, we don't know. We're not sure if it's going to be Chris Farrell or Robbie Henshaw. Does Henshaw go back to full back, which I know you think it might happen, and Bundy Aki is the only one that's always been there. So I'm nitpicking, but that is one of the concerns, that there's not a cohesion at the moment in the team.
Yeah, well, they miss Ringrose, but Farrell's back, Henderson, Byrne back in the mix. As you mentioned, Henshaw available again. What would you like to see in terms of the team, Rory?
I'd like to see a change at hooker. I think, Rory Best has proven himself and will lead the team to the World Cup, but he is 36 years old and will be 37 by the time we get to Japan. So I think we need to know whether, Niall Scannell played in Rome 2 years ago, he can do it. I think Sean Cronin deserves a start, just to at least get that under his belt, because I think he is one of the form hookers in the country, if not the form hooker.
How crazy is that? The question is, can he start a game for Ireland? He's so experienced.
Of course he can. He starts Leinster's biggest games all the time. I'd like to see that. I think Rory Best will be back in for the last two games. Look, I'd like to see Carberry start, just to see how he goes from the start of a Six Nations game. It might happen against France in Dublin, but I understand that Sexton, I think, needs game time. But I think he's already used, 27 players in this tournament. He made 5 changes, or maybe 6 in the end, between the first 2 games. He needs a bit of cohesion. So I think he's probably going to go quite strong with a couple of tweaks to his bench. John Ryan's going to play. Andrew Porter drops out. Little things like that the general public won't probably cotton on or focus in on. But he'll see that as an investment in another tight head prop going into that World Cup selection. Does James Ryan need a rest? Does Tadhg Furlong need a rest? These are all the things, but I think the fact that Italy comes in between the 2 rest weekends just makes things a little bit more tricky for them when it comes to experimentation, and that's why I think we probably won't see as much as many fans would like.
But by misfortune, did they to Johnny Sexton, did they get to see Carberry, and is that all they want from him now? You know what I mean? That's the most interesting thing, I think, because I think Sexton will start. I think we're pretty confident on that one. But it would be very interesting to see Sexton go for the 6-day turnaround, France to Wales, because that's what, again, we're replicating a World Cup scenario. But Carberry, I think we're going to have to see him. I think we're going to have to see him to close these games. And John Cooney, if he's on the bench. I think we should see these guys actually close games. So 60 minutes for what we know is the nailed-on halfbacks.
Yeah, it'd be good to see Cooney get a bit more exposure. You mentioned it, Rory, a couple of areas for them to work on. What do you think Ireland themselves will have been talking about? I know everyone on the outside is talking about changing philosophy of their attack, but generally, Darren, it's the little things.
Yeah, it is, and I think that the philosophy of the attack was good enough to have a historically good 2018. I don't think a huge amount needs to change. They just need to execute on the things that we know they do well, and I think their kicking and in particular their chase game can improve. I just think their general attitude is the wrong word, but their general energy levels just have been low for those first 2 games. Just the little things that we take for granted with the Joe Schmidt side. Their animation off the ball, which distracts the tacklers, the would-be tacklers, and takes the focus away from the guy on the ball. Because it looks like Ireland, you know which player is going to carry the ball all the time. Just stepping things up in terms of the tip-on passes, bringing other forwards into the game, or else pulling the ball back to Johnny Sexton in behind. The shape is there. They're just not using the options that are there. I think if they get their kicking game right, it brings them into the game. They always draw strength from winning those high balls. If they can get their passing just a little bit more accurate, that just creates that bit more space for the guy who gets the ball. And these Ireland backs with time and space can do damage. They'll probably do damage against Italy either way, because Italy are so far away from where Ireland are. But I think if they can just get a couple of percentage points better, I think Scotland, we saw the potential for what they could get. They just weren't quite as accurate as we know they can be. Their set piece is excellent. The fundamentals of their game are very, very sound. And you'd just like to see a bit more variation in the 22. They do score nearly every time they go into the 22, but there is something about those repetitive phases, those one-out runners that just leads to kind of, you lose a bit of heart every time they get the ball. It looks like there's less chance of them scoring every time they go through another phase. Yeah,
it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because they often do get results out of it. And even you saw the key penalty against Scotland that led them to open up that gap was because of the relentlessness of the carry. Gavin, what's been positive about the first 2 games so far? Obviously, losing to England at home is never positive, but has this squad under Joe Schmidt done things to improve their prospects, I guess, of the World Cup?
I actually went back through the England game, and there's not a lot to take out of it, and they can't fix it. They essentially can't fix it till the World Cup quarter-final, because I don't see them coming against a team like England in a competitive sense till then. Arguably Wales, but they're just not as big. But positives, I really like seeing Sean O'Brien back. He didn't play that well in Murrayfield. His numbers were okay, but his collisions in tackles and his collisions in offence weren't there. But you've seen Seanie coming into games over the years, early in the season, and he plays like that. So I'm really looking forward to seeing if he calls off Van der Flyer, how he goes in Rome. I think that's a big one, because we haven't seen any of Dan Levy this season. So Sean O'Brien becomes more and more important. I'm really excited to see how he gets on.
You spoke to him the other day, obviously about the move to London Irish, but he seemed quite confident about where he's going to get to.
He should be, because he knows that when he's fit and firing, he's one of the best players in the world. And I really like his combination with Jack Conan in that back row.
Conan was excellent.
Conan was excellent, and he. Look, CJ Stander has never let Ireland down and is an excellent player, but Conan gives a point of difference, and Conan could, if he gets a bit of confidence at this level, could introduce a little bit of that kind of change up to the Irish attack. He does like to free his hands when he wins those collisions. He does have probably a better passing game than CJ Stander does, and it gives Joe Schmidt the scope to say, stick CJ at 6 and take Peter O'Mahony out of it at times. It gives him more rotation options. So I like, that's one positive, I think, is that Jack Conan's getting a proper run at 8 and
he wants it. Producing. He talks about how he wants it. He wants to be out in the pitch. He feels like he's good enough and all that. It's not arrogance, in fairness to him.
He's an honest guy, isn't he?
Yeah, he comes out. Yeah, I think he could well nail down that jersey between now and the World Cup.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. What can we expect from Italy? So Sergio Parisse is going to be missing. He hasn't been great, to be honest, on the pitch for a couple of years, really, now. Can we expect him to give any challenge at all, or is there going to be 20 defeats in a row now?
Well, they made life difficult for Wales, didn't they? I mean, that they were awkward without ever really looking like they were going to particularly pull away and win that game, even though they kept it tight for an hour. I just think that Ireland have figured out the way to beat them, and they can't handle Ireland's relentless possession game. And it's just, ever since that World Cup game where they won by 7 points and Italy made life really difficult for them in the Olympic Stadium, Italy haven't had a handle on how to stop Ireland, and they forced them to miss tackles. They forced them to make an awful lot of tackles. Conor O'Shea's spoken about that this week, but they missed an awful lot of them as well. And I think it's going to be one of those days where they grind them down for 40 minutes and then pull away in the second half. I just don't see any way that this Italy team can even trouble Ireland.
You still see Italy playing against Tier 2 teams, and they're probably arguably the best Tier 2 team in the world. But their opposition is just out of their league too many times. Like, a lot of people talk about Georgia coming into the Six Nations. Georgia played Tier 2 teams all the time, so their records are excellent. That's why they're ahead of them in the world rankings. Italy are constantly coming up against teams that they just don't have the players to beat. And that's why actually looks like now that the fact that they've been put on the top table for so long has been really detrimental to their progress.
Yeah, well, their under-20 teams getting a couple of good results last year, this year. Obviously, Benetton making good progress. Zebra seem to have gone backwards again. Like, when are we going to see the signs of this? Because Conor O'Shea talks about sitting with Sergio Parisse in Rome in a couple of years' time and toasting an Italian success with a beer, but is it realistically the next 5 years, do you think, that they'll be winning maybe 2, even 3?
It's like Ireland in the early 90s. It never looked like it was going to end.
Well, like the Scots, I mean, it's difficult when you've got 2 teams. That's one difficulty they have. The player base is not big. It's difficult to see where they're going to come from, but you see the under-18s beat England, I think, last year. The 20s have beaten Scotland the last 3 years in a row. Benetton's progress, while it's still, at Pro 14 level, and they almost got out of Challenge Cup, it is progress. It looks like they might get to the playoffs this season. That'll give them a lift. But in terms of beating the 5 teams they play against every year, it's just very, very difficult. They could get France on the last day and finally end that long wait. I just don't see it happening against Ireland. Like, Ireland, Scotland, Wales and England are continually improving, and whatever improvements Italy make, they're just trying to catch up with teams that are pulling away from them all the time. It makes life an awful lot.
They don't have world-class players in key positions, though.
Yeah, it doesn't help.
That's it. Like, even in the bad old days with Ireland, there was always 1 or 2 players that could kind of drag you on, and that's what's killing them. An out half just to come from somewhere will change everything.
Yeah. Just to wrap up then, what's kind of Ireland's checklist this weekend? What do they need to do? Obviously a comprehensive win, but what are the other key factors that will be a successful day?
An improved attack, a better flow, just a tighter performance all round, better kicking, better passing, more constructive play around the phases. Even if you are going through a long set of phases, that it's not just bash, bash, bash. They're capable of so much more. We've seen them do so much more, and you're looking at a 30, 40 point win really is the minimum requirement.
Yeah, Gavin, from you, I guess individually as well, players wise, what do you want to see?
Yeah, actually, Chris Farrell would be another good one if he does get in there. But I want to see Ireland score points without 30, 40 phases. That's what people need to see them do against a team like Italy. They need to score like with set moves, with plays like that. It has to be comprehensive. Like it does need to be a bonus point wrapped up by half time.
Yeah, well, here's hoping. Well, coming up after the break, we'll turn our attention to the other Six Nations matches this weekend as Wales tackled England in a Grand Slam eliminator, while France will be desperate to atone for their thrashing in Twickenham as they entertain Scotland in Paris. You're very welcome back. Well, Gavin, huge game over in Cardiff this weekend. Should be the tie of the round. We're looking at it with the Grand Slam champions here, I guess, essentially the way the tournament's set up. How do you see this one going, first of all?
It's a game of the tournament. I still think we can ruin the Grand Slam for Wales, but they're really going to cook it up for England. There was a great story. They had a play they had a theatre production put on in the dressing room of where the English would be on Saturday. The squad came and went in and watched this about Ray Gravel, their great player, and all that, kind of like they're alone at stands play. Nice. So they've been bubbling all week, like internally, like it's going to be. They're doing what they've always done for this, and like on paper they probably can't win it, but I still think England have a little bit of an edge there because Owen Farrell's playing from another planet at the moment. But Wales in Cardiff against England, it's always one of the games of the tournament. What
have they done well, Rory? I mean, England generally when they're winning are kind of unlikable, especially from an Irish point of view, but it's been thoroughly enjoyable to watch them, and as you say, Farrell has added to that. What has changed for England over the last couple of matches?
They look like the team of 2016, which is why I'd fear a bit for Wales, because that team just didn't look like they were ever going to lose again. Their kicking game has been exceptional. Owen Farrell has moved on to another level. He's just so dominant. There was one carry he took against France when they were on top in the 22. The way he burst onto the ball and broke the line he's like Johnny Wilkinson and Martin Johnson rolled into one. He's just this quintessential, and throw Lawrence Delalio in as well. He's just a quintessential leader. And I think he's so important to them. Like, if he got injured at all, the whole thing could fall apart. But right now, he looks at the top of his game, and the way he's running the show on the back of an unbelievable pack effort, winning every collision, all those dominant tackles that we've heard all about in the week of the Ireland game. With the Vunipolas, the Itogis, they're starting to lose a couple of bodies now. It'll be interesting to see whether they can sustain it. But their power game is superb. But they've also got the Farrell controlling things from 10, and they've got unbelievable pace and guile outside him. Henry Stay's been a really good addition to their attack. He's a very clever decision maker, a good defender as well. They're the complete package, and we kind of all thought they were falling apart a little bit for the last year, but they've kind of found their way back into it, and they've had their blip at the right time, really, because who's going to remember about 2018 if they go on and do what looks like they could do in 2019? Yeah, I see no way the Welsh stop.
But we got them at the wrong time, didn't they? They have lost Mako Vunipola and Maro Itoje. Like that's an enormous thing to think.
And Chris Ashton now as well.
I know their replacements are good, but it still changes how good a team they are.
Yeah. Eddie Jones warned us, I guess, about the World Cup that was always the plan. It looks to be quite prescient now. I mean, essentially, we're talking about England now. People are saying, they're changing the game, but it is interesting the way they've gone about it, particularly with that kicking, because they were kind of near Ireland in terms of average possession, but now they seem more than happy to either kick to retrieve or kick to put that pressure back on. It seems like a really clever way for them, especially when they've got such power players as well, not to just fatigue with phases.
It's just the great test of Eddie Jones. Normally his coaching tickets fall apart after a couple of years, or his teams fall apart after great success. But what he did was he changed his back room, and he changed the way they play, and he's given power to other coaches to come in and change the way they attack and the way they defend. And so it's Eddie Jones, arguably at the end of what it has been an epic career, try and prove that he can evolve and he can bring a team to a higher level.
It'd be interesting to see how, having seen England do it for 2 games in a row, and Wales will pick a proper back three, unlike France, who seemed to not watch Ireland England at all.
Incredible.
Didn't put a back three on it. There was times where Hughes just went missing completely. So Wales, I mean, Liam Williams is probably not as strong as Halfpenny at full back. We saw that in the Lions tour. He's not as good a cover of the backfield in the Rob Kearney mould. But they will be ready for all those kicks, you would imagine. And no matter how accurate you are, if Wales are able to cover them, then you negate that tactic. And then if England have to keep the ball and have to go around you, that makes life a bit more difficult. But at the same time, it means that Wales are probably going to have to keep 3 back at all times, which keeps their front line, a little bit, it makes life a bit more difficult for Sean Edwards' defence. But it will be interesting to see how tactically Wales adapt to what England has done the first 2 rounds, because they'll have put a lot more stock into those performances than France did.
Yeah, and Gatland, in fairness to him, does tend to tailor things for the opposition. Obviously, they made a lot of changes for that Italy game and got the win, but have we seen anything really impressive from Wales, do you think, in that first game even?
No, not much yet. And there's flaws in their team. It's not the best team Gatland's ever had. So in that sense, I think it does come down to who is the better coach. They won't be meeting too many more times in their lives, in their careers. So I think this was the one that kind of could sort them out, like who can outwit the other man.
Yeah,
I'm edging towards Eddie Jones, actually.
Yeah, we're kind of in that era, aren't we, where the coach makes I mean, Joe Schmidt has made the difference for Ireland.
Eddie Jones figured out Joe Schmidt the last time. That was a rare one, but he did.
Yeah. Well, the one thing you can't discount with Wales is the fact that they came back from so far behind in Paris. Look, we all know that France are a little bit of a rabble, but at the same time, they were dominant in that first half. Wales went in, one of the biggest comebacks of international, at that level of international history. They were good in the second half without being really impressive, but the grit they showed will stand to them. They don't have the personnel that they had a couple of years ago, even.
France collapsed in that second half.
France did collapse, but Wales, Wales still had to put the pressure on in the right areas, and that will stand to them. They're back in Cardiff, which makes a big difference as well. But you're right, they haven't been hugely impressive. England probably have the cleverer coaching ticket, but then a year ago we weren't saying that about Eddie Jones. It's amazing how quickly the narratives turn around, isn't it?
Yeah, Joe Schmidt always warns us about the fine margins, but this has really proven the case. A couple of things going right for them, and suddenly they're back on top. The other game of the weekend is going to be really fascinating. You mentioned France's. I mean, it was hard to watch, wasn't it, against England? They just seemed completely shorn of ideas and even how to respond to it. Where does it stem from, Gavin? There's many issues probably here to lead to a poor national team.
It stems from Jacques Brunel, and it stems from Laporte, who hired him. They looked there. We know how the quality of player that's there. We can see it. You know what I mean? And they are badly coached team. They've good young assistant coaches. And then he's gone and torn it all up again. Like Ntamak at 10, I don't know if he's played 10 at a high level at all. I don't know if he's played
a bit there for Toulouse, but he's in and out at 12 as well, yeah. And he's tasked with saving the day now.
But Camille Lopez and Parra, they said these are our senior guys and we'll let the younger guys come through and learn from them. And he just discards them. Whether there's people talking in the media annoyed him and all that, but Brunel right now just looks like a strange and terrible and really backwards appointment by France at a period of time where they can almost they literally might have to give up on this World Cup cycle and just start focusing on the one that's 4 years, 5 years down the road.
Yeah, that would make sense. Is it all on his shoulders, do you think, Rory?
Largely, and I think in the past when Livermont was there, they could have a player revolt and fall back on the leadership core that was there, but the leadership core is no longer there. The Dustois of this world have moved on, and the team that are there are really inexperienced and only know losing. They've had 5 or 6 years of really poor results at international level, and they're all undeniably talented. They come from really strong clubs who are all competitive in both the top 14 in Europe. I think that they could do it picking a few more Racing players, because they're the ones that really cope at European level on a regular basis with the Saracens, the Leinsters. They're probably the best organised. I know there's injuries at play there, but a consistent selection policy. There's a reason Joe Schmidt is going to pick Conor Murray and Johnny Sexton this weekend, even though it's Italy. He's trying to get the combinations together all the time. If you look back at his selection, he always goes for those combinations. France just throw them out the window whenever things go wrong and make 8 or 9 changes, isn't it? you can't build anything with that. And they've got really talented players who are just learning the wrong things at the wrong time at the outset of their career. They might be building towards 2023, but the damage this is doing to those young players right now could be cataclysmic, and they'll have to rely on another generation. Like the 20s team coming through this year with Demba Bamba.
It's a great team.
A really good team, but those players are coming into a setup and learning all the bad habits, and their confidence must be damaged.
Yeah,
Scotland without Finn Russell should be able to figure them out.
Last one just on France. I want to ask you about Dupont. A lot of kind of burden on his shoulders now. People are expecting him to save the day. Is he good enough to do that?
Yeah, what a player! They keep coming. There's 3 or 4 or 5 of them in the last few years that keep coming through at scrum halves for France. But he's so special. Like I think it was bad. I thought he should have gone. Initially, I was like, okay, Parra's back there. Let him be the general. He's seen it all. He's done it all. But Dupont's the man. Like even against England in that game, he still showed like he has the potential to become the best 9 in the world. Incredible
impact. Scotland are in a bit of disarray. The latest is that Josh Strouse can't find his passport, apparently, and he may not be able to travel. I think they've called in parliamentary help for that one. But it does look like they've been rocked by injuries on the back of what was really a failure against Ireland to take advantage.
Yeah, listening to Conor Shave, and he was talking about the players that faced Italy in that first game, and now they're all gone from Scotland. The vagaries of international rugby, because Italy will probably fancy playing against the Scotland team this weekend. Hogg and Russell are the kind of core of their attacking game. They're the two kind of X-factor players, for want of a better phrase, that unlock defences. And I know Adam Hastings has been excellent in the Guinness Pro 14 this season, but he's very inexperienced at this level. And Blair Kinghorn just isn't the same. He's a good player, but he's not the same level as Stuart Hogg. And the one thing France still have is a lot of very big forwards who can win collisions, and I think that's where Scotland still probably don't. They didn't lose an awful lot of collisions against Ireland, but I think a good pack can still bully them. And France are probably going to go back to basics and make life very, very difficult for Scotland. Strauss, they better sort that passport, because he was one of the few players who really was able to
he was sensational.
He was very, very good. I mean, he ran out of steam a little bit, but he brings something to them.
But France are going to run out of steam, Rory, aren't they?
France,
it's almost guaranteed, isn't it?
They will, but they always
hang on in there.
They'll probably pick 6 forwards, and I don't know if they pick 6-8 this week or 6-2 on the bench this week. But they always have a lot of power they can roll off the bench. If they can get ahead, there's still enough talent in this French. I don't know. I always have this belief in France that they'll eventually get it right. Maybe I'm naive, but I just don't think Scotland must have taken a knock to their confidence losing to Ireland in the way they did, because Ireland didn't play well that day.
Okay, so I guess call those 2 games. We're expecting Ireland to win heavily. What do you think, Rory?
England to win in Cardiff, and I think we'll see a French response and a narrow victory over Scotland.
Would you go along with that, Gav?
England by a hair's breadth, and a famous Scottish victory, considering what the team is.
Yeah, it's going to be a good weekend either way. Thanks a million, guys. Okay, that's all we have time for on the back row tonight. My thanks to Gavin and Rory. We'll be back next Wednesday. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you again soon.